Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody to Mass Bay RRE's third Thursday for March 18th. And there's always a glitch. Oh, come on. Anyway, welcome. We're pleased to have as our featured speaker tonight, Chris Jagodzinski, the Assistant Vice President of Operations for Amtrak. Before we get going with that, I just want to tell you about a couple of our upcoming meetings. On Thursday, April 15th, which today is not tax day, we will finally be presenting Ben Clark, the president of the Hobo and Winnipesaukee Railroads. We'll discuss the trials, tribulations, and occasional triumphs of a New Hampshire short line railroader. This one night only presentation, Ben will share for the first time images from his personal photo album. So there should be something you wouldn't want to miss. And on Thursday, May 20th, the Mass Bay member and retired railroad consultant, Andrew Jennings, will give us an introduction to the railway culture of Japan and Taiwan. The program will cover the history of the railways on these two island nations, their routes, operations, and their equipment. So that should be a fascinating program. And be sure to join in. For both of those upcoming meetings, the link to the webinar will be posted on our website about 1 week in advance, and those people who are on our email list will also receive an email notification. So without further ado, we'll get to tonight's program. As I said, our guest is Chris Jagodzinski, the Assistant Vice President for Operations at Amtrak. Chris has been heavily involved in the testing, preparation, and launch of the next generation of Acela trains. He's also has taken on a number of other tasks at Amtrak that he'll talk about. And he's also been a real friend to the railroad community. He is the person primarily responsible for getting the Amtrak Autumn Express excursions over the rails for the past few years. And we are all very grateful for that and look forward to the next one whenever that is possible. But we will certainly be letting people know about it when that comes. So anyway, Chris, it is all yours and welcome.
All right, Dave. Well, thank you very much. I just appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Mass Bay. I don't say this to all the groups now, just for the record here, but Mass Bay is always one of my favorite groups. I always appreciate all the work that everybody does here, with Mass Bay. It's always a great program, great newsletters, and you guys always do a great job. So I couldn't be prouder to be here. So thank you for that. So a couple things here. So just give me a minute. I'm going to switch gears here and let me flip it over. Amtrak is not a Zoom railroad, just for the record here. We are a Teams railroad. We do Teams, and I am a little rusty on how to do this, so just bear with me for 1 second. I am going to do this, and then, all right.
There we go. Looks good.
All right, looks good. So, okay. So thank you once again, and I have a habit of talking quickly sometimes, and I'm going to try not to do that. I'm a Northeasterner here by birth, and we do things fast up here. We drive fast, we talk fast. So Dave, just wave at me or something.
Let me just add, Chris, that we won't be taking any live questions during your program. If people have some questions, there's a Q&A thing on the bottom of the screen, and we'll be monitoring that, and also we're looking at the chat window as well. So
great. Okay. And always happy to answer some questions. So once again, I am Chris Jagodzinski. We're going to talk about some stuff with the next generation Acela. And, when we get to some other stuff, I'll throw other things in here though today that are more than just the Acela. I am an operating guy. I'm not a civil engineer. I'm not an electrical engineer. I'm the operating guy. I know how to run the trains. We know how to break the trains sometimes too. Sometimes that happens, right? But so hopefully today, we're going to talk about some complicated stuff here today. In some cases, just to kind of peek under the covers of all of the work. What does it take to get something like this going? Because it does involve some science. But I think though, if I went through the presentation pretty well, I know a couple of you folks out here are MIT people now, right? I'm not that smart, but I think I got all the Greek letters out of the
Neither are a lot of
presentation.
MIT people.
Well, I'm not going to say. There might be smart people, but you got to do stuff too. So, right? Anyway.
So,
But I think I got all the Greek letters out of the presentation, so there'll be no calculus tonight. There's no test at the end, so it's okay, as we go through this stuff. But I think, though, I've got a little bit of something for everyone. So if you are really into some stuff and want to understand some complicated stuff, I think I'll have some stuff for you, and just some good old history. We have stuff I think we'll have a little bit of thing for everybody. So who am I again? So thank you for the introduction. Who am I? So Chris Jagodzinski, I'm the AVP of Operations with Amtrak. Here is my first day on the railroad, as you can see. We'll see if anybody can recognize where that is. Maybe in the Q&A later on, we can see who can guess to see, where that picture was taken. I won't reveal it up, but that is me a long, long time ago. I had more hair back then. I've been with the Amtrak, though, now, let's see, it's 2021. So I've been with the Amtrak 32 years, 34 on the railroad. I started with Amtrak actually in Boston. That's how I got to know the RRE. And my first association with the RRE, I believe, was on a trip with Mr. Bill Crawford. Not sure if he's on tonight or not, but we ran a trip. You guys ran a trip from Boston over to Albany and back. I don't know if it was a Leaf train or which it was, but we had a train, and Amtrak as a management trainee, if you will. I was assigned to the train to help keep things moving. So that was my first exposure to you folks, and I've been there ever since. Most of my time has been spent in the operations department. I did spend a year on the dark side of mechanical 1 year. I spent a lot of time working with the engineering up in New England, high-speed crossovers. I was on part of the electrification project when that first started. I've done a lot of infrastructure work down here. I've done any number of different things. Most recently, though, after the train 501 accident out in, out by Chehalis, Washington there, I get relieved of all my other responsibilities. I had contracts, I had crew, equipment planning, national operations, a whole bunch of stuff. And they said, go make PTC happen, and folks have been reading about it in the news, but we were able to get PTC in on the 21,000 miles of Amtrak network this past December 31st was the deadline. We made it. And now that PTC is never done, there's always going to be stuff to do. But I've got additional responsibilities now. We are working on any number of different things for new service introductions. So the next generation Acela certainly is a huge part of it here, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We're working, very actively working. Folks have probably seen some recent news releases on Gulf Coast service. We are anxious to get the service started between New Orleans and Mobile. Hopefully in 2022, you'll see we're working with the state of Vermont right now. We'd love to get the extension of the Ethan Allen service, working with VTrans to get extended from Rutland up to Burlington, Vermont. Any number of a variety of different things. And so, we're working with all this sort of stuff, and, it takes a lot of details to kind of pull it off and to get things going. So what does it take to launch a new Acela? So we'll talk about that. So really it comes down to three big areas we're going to talk about. Okay. The first thing you need is, it's going to sound stupid, but it's real basic. You need a train. All right. That's not as easy as you think it is, but you do need a train. So we're going to talk about, how do we pick the train? What do we do about the train? Next thing you need is tracks. All right. You need a place to run it. What is that infrastructure going to look like? And then, it's easy to do tracks and trains, but the other thing is you also need teams to put everything together, and we'll show you. So it's more than just about, taking the train and rolling it down the track safely, make sure it stops, but there's a whole integrated project we have to do, a lot of stuff with in order to make it happen. All right. And so we'll talk about each of these three areas tonight where we focus on. I'll spend a lot more time on tracks and trains because I know a lot of folks here are, let's just say, enthusiasts, right? And we want to learn about a lot of stuff. Teams, it's not so exciting, but teams is also necessary, though. That's more the softer side, the customer side of stuff, and other details that you need to do besides just the railroad itself, what you see here. But how do you make the service right for the customer? And that's what the teams is about. We'll talk about that at the end. So let's talk about the train first. All right. Right now, the current situation, this is sort of pre-COVID now. I have to, COVID has definitely, everybody sees that COVID has changed everyone's lives. The Amtrak ridership fell through the floor, absolutely fell through the floor just about a year ago, where we went, and we, from where we were, we dropped off to, I think we were probably running around 10% of our regular riders. 1 out of every 10 riders was all that was left. The riders are coming back now. We're at about, probably somewhere between 25, 30%, depending on where you look at it. Long distance is sort of stronger. than other stuff. There's definitely not a lot of business travel out there. There still is some, but spring break and you see all the stuff going in the news. We're basically in tandem with the rest of the country, whether it's driving, whether it's people working, whether it's the schools, whether it's the airlines. We're pretty much in step with the rest of the country when it comes down to it. So when I talk about this stuff here, it's all going to be about the pre-COVID operation, and where everything is. So let's talk about Acela pre-COVID. The Acela fleet was really running at capacity in 1999, 2000, we got 20 sets of equipment that were built by a consortium between Alstom and Bombardier. Bombardier did the manufacturing. The legacy Acela fleet had the Alstom traction components in there, and we bought 20 of them. Okay. And out of those 20, at first they had some trouble at first, but mechanically speaking, we got things righted up again after the trains were running. And the equipment plan at the end, before COVID knocked everything out of the ballpark, we ran 17 out of those 20 sets a day. So the other 3 would be either been in some type of scheduled maintenance or perhaps even unscheduled maintenance, at a variety of the facilities around the Northeast corridor. So we were running 17 out of 20%. So, that was how we were doing. Each of those trains, though, they would run up to 900 miles in a day. It's basically, if you say the Northeast corridor is 456 miles from Boston to Washington and back, several of those trains would do a round trip, or a variety of short trips. Sometimes we would go to New York, start in New York in the morning, go to Boston, go to DC, wind up back in New York. But multiple trains with 900 miles a day, 304 seat capacity. Okay, that was it. That's what they carried. And basically, though, the train sets were running on a 1990s technology, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes here. So, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? It's been a very successful product, and, the passengers like it. It does a great business. It was very popular, but we were getting stuck. We were up against the capacity limits, and folks know, and I kind of hear it all the time. How come it costs so much to take the Acela? Well, the economic supply, though, and we were filling the trains up because it was such a popular product, though. But the difficulty was, we were kind of stuck. How do you grow the business? How do you grow the business? So do you put on more trains? Do you put on more capacity? Do you put on more frequencies? And how do you do that based on those constraints that I laid out there? So, if I wound up getting some more trains, let's suppose I got a handful of more trains, right? Well, then if I've got newer stuff and then kind of older stuff, how do I mix the fleet? Maybe is it going to be exactly the same? Well, it's 304, but what happens if I've got a service disruption? I need to switch them around. Sometimes that gives me less flexibility. So, more trains, yeah, maybe we could do that, but we had to take into mind, how we could mix them in the existing fleet. More capacity. So we looked at this in 2012. We looked at this in 2012 and said, okay, what if we went out and bought 40 more coaches? We'll take those 6-car Acela sets with 304 people or 304 seats on them. We'll put 2 more coaches in there. That way we'll get up to about 440. Okay. The problem is everything on these trains is so computerized. There's a computer network. Okay, there's a computer network. Everything, the technology was great at the time. It was one of the most, in the late 1990s when this was launched, okay, it was one of the most technologically advanced trains at that time. So I don't know, I can't see a show of hands here right now, but how many people on this call are still running their computers on Windows 98? My guess is not a lot, right? But guess what? You need a Windows 98 computer to run the technology that's on this train. Okay. When Dell or IBM or Lenovo or anybody makes new computers, they're making them for the thousands, of people across the country. And the amount of investment that comes in can support the development of newer technologies. We've only got 20 Acela sets times, 2 power cars, 40 power cars. The vendors have a difficult time making an investment into it. So these train sets are really 1998 technology, and you can't. It was very difficult. If you wanted to go to Ford and said, go build me a Taurus, they could probably do that. Well, I don't know. Maybe they discontinued the Taurus. I forget. But, what happens if you said, Ford, you got to go build me a Taurus, but I want you to build me a 1998 Taurus. So it's exactly the same as these other things. Now, think about that. What would that technology be? As we know, vehicles these days have computer chips in them and things like that. It becomes very difficult. And so can it be done? I always say, anything can be done with time and money. But the problem is, though, how do you make that so that the new equipment is compatible with the old equipment? And that becomes a very real issue. I mean, frankly, even on the Acela fleet that's out there, like, for example, the company that made the doors, the door operators, the things to open and shut the doors, that company's been out of business for a while, so we can still get some parts and we can still maintain the stuff. But as different vendors go out of business, or vendors do come and go. I mean, vendors do, look at the Bud Company, right? They were around for a while. They're gone now, but vendors do come and go. And, it's very difficult to get those things to be able to support that older technology. We did seriously look at it, though. And as a matter of fact, I don't know how many people know, but in 2012, when we were trying to figure out what are we going to do about our options, we actually did run a test train. And here it is right here. Okay. If you count the cars, the Acela is usually a 6-car train. Count the cars here. We actually made a 9-car Acela train here. And there it is. That's on the bridge in Trenton, New Jersey. We tested it, from DC up to the racetrack in New Jersey and back. And we actually, it was on a weekend, so we cut one of the other sets apart. We took the cars out, put them in, and we actually ran a 9-car train around to go see what it was. When the Acela was originally built with those 2 power cars, there was enough horsepower in there to eventually run it to be a 10-car train. Okay, you could actually run to be a 10-car train. So we actually did build it. We ran around, and and this was after 12 years of Acela. We said, is it really going to work? And yeah, it worked like a champ. The problem is, though, once again, so the only way I could, my size of my fleet was fixed, 20 train sets times 6 cars a piece, that's all the cars I had. And, I just could not we had difficulty getting everything with the technology to match it up so you could make it compatible. One of the other things too to think about is, I know there's some folks here that are involved in the in the preservation movements and things like that. And you always see, okay, somebody restored an F7 somewhere, an FP9, or you got the Alco PAs running. That's all great. That's all great. And you can do that. It's just like, my dad, when I was growing up, had a 69 VW Beetle. He always used to tell me he could go in and set the points on that thing in like 18 seconds, right? It was just mechanical. It was simple to maintain. You fix a fan belt and the thing goes, right? As computers come in, you can do that for an F7 or an Alco PA, something like that. Unfortunately, because of the computers and these things, I think that once you see the Acelas, once they're done running, frankly, they're probably just never going to run again, because the technology in the preservation movement, it'll be a nice museum piece. It'll look good. But in order to keep things running, it's going to be very difficult if you think about it, as these technologies of these locomotives from the 1990s and the 2000s, as they retire, it's going to become more and more difficult for the preservation movement to go and, find a place to go run these things, especially for the Acela, because frankly, unless the museum's got a really long extension cord, you're probably not going to get too far with the Acela train anyway, right? So anyway. So we did look at it, though, and here's our test train back in 2012 to make the number of cars. So what can we do about, maybe can we increase frequencies? We are already running at 17 sets, okay, out of 20. So the remaining 2 to 3 sets were in some type of maintenance program, whether I'm redoing carpets or seats, or I'm doing trucks or air brakes or wheels or brake shoes or whatever it is, or sometimes, unplanned defects do happen. So really, there's very limited opportunity to create more frequencies to try and really ratchet it down and take those other sets out of the shop. No fleet in the world runs at 100% of it. Nothing runs at 100% availability. It just doesn't happen. Even the Talgo trains out west, which were as close to 100% as I've ever seen, when it came down to major maintenance programs, they had to come out. When I was running the op center, I always used to have to put either a set of Horizons or Superliners up there to go backfill the Talgos. When we were painting them, a set of conventional equipment went in. When we were redoing the carpets, a set of conventional equipment had to go in. So really, we were kind of stuck here. What do we want to do about a train? So, all these factors went into the decision and said, okay, you know what we need to do? We need to buy new. Okay, we need to buy new. And a couple things went into it. We were looking for off-the-shelf proven technology. The Acela did work well. And don't get me wrong, the Acela was very nice. It really helped us make the leap from conventional equipment to something higher speed with the train sets. It was the first leap of above 125 miles an hour for us, truly, to start to get into the higher speed ranges at 150. It did have its problems, but it really has been commercially successful for a while once we got those bugs ironed out. So one of the things we wanted to do is let's go look and see if we can buy something off the shelf, buy a foreign technology that's being used so we don't have to spend as much time proving it or chasing the bugs out of it, okay? Not only that, by taking some sort of off-the-shelf technology, we're going to get a technology that's supported by vendors for other passenger operators, okay? Because if we find something that's off the shelf, you know, as a European manufacturer or Japanese manufacturer, whoever it may be, they're already supporting their base software for other people. So, for example, the Siemens ACS 64 locomotive, which we know in the Northeast Corridor and use, it's a very worthy successor to the AM7, okay? You know, and it has been, you guys can argue with me, but I think it's also a very worthy successor to the GG1 in the Corridor. It's a great locomotive, but is based off the Siemens Vectron locomotive that's used overseas in multiple places in Europe. Now, ours doesn't make the do-re-mi sound. If you watch that on YouTube, ours doesn't sing like that. But it is based on that technology. And so that we've got a Siemens, you know, level of knowledge here that is able to support Amtrak, you know, for these locomotives. We don't have a one-off system here that we have to go maintain and find some stuff, okay? And guess what? We got rid of those 98 computers, and I still got, I could probably show you, it's in my bag here, but I've got an adapter. You need for the computer geeks on here, serial ports. You still got to use serial ports. Now, my new laptop from Amtrak, you know, I haven't had a serial port on my laptop in years, and then you got to get these adapters out, and you have to figure out a way to adapt the new technology to talk to the old technology, and it just becomes, you know, lots of points of failure, just lots of points of failure. So by buying new, we kind of eliminate all that stuff there. So we did work through an RFP process, okay? And, you know, we had a working group. In fact, I was part of that, believe it or not, and part of my former job between 2012 and 2013. We had a working group put together. We did issue an RFP on the street. Actually, the final RFP came out in July 2014. There was some question about, do we issue an RFP with California at the same time with the high-speed rail there or not? We choose to do everything of ours independently. And so 2014, and then finally, August 2016, after a 2-year process of negotiation and vetting out and everything else, we actually awarded the contract to Alstom, you know, for a tilting train, you know, based on the TGV platform, you know, but it tilts. It's essentially a TGV, but it's got some other stuff from the tilting train. I think it's the Pendelene. I probably should have looked that up before the trip here. But here is the event in August of 2016 at the Vice President Biden at the time. You know, we did it in Wilmington, as you can see. And then that's Tony Kosha, who's our chairman of the Amtrak board, still is here. As we announced it, Alstom got the contract, and, you know, we began the process here, you know, of the train. So there it is. I'm not sure what that model is. That model, I think, is in our headquarters building down in DC right now. But yeah, that's the Acela model that's out there. So off we're running. So what did we buy? What did we buy? So this set is going to be a little bit different. All right, because it's a TGV style. It's not done up in the American way. It's a little bit different. And here's an overview of what it looks like. It's basically a 9-car train in the middle. Okay. So PC1, you see on the top left, that's power car 1, PV, passenger vehicle 1, 2, 3. You see passenger vehicles, you know, 1 through 9. And you can see how the train's configured. There's a PC2, a power car 2, that's on the rear of the train. Okay. So, you know, what you have here essentially, though, is a, you know, it's a 9-car setup. But we'll talk a little bit about what is truly different about this than, you know, than the legacy Acela fleet or other stuff that we have seen around here before. So the way it's being designed, though, is because it's different in the cars, but the cars are actually smaller. They're not the, you know, a standard passenger car, whether you see it on the T up there in Boston, on Amtrak, the Superliners, the Amfleets, the Acela, all those cars are about the same length at about 85 feet. That's a standard passenger car length. The TGV equipment is much shorter. It's got less counts, but it's got, you know, so it's shorter, less seating capacity, but there's more of them to make up the same space. So, you know, you can see the 9 cars of the train here. There's a total of about, it'll haul about 386 people on that train with everything combined, okay? 386 people versus the Acela, which has 304, all right? By rearranging the interior space, by rearranging the doors, and you're gonna say, well, geez, they just made it longer. So the current train, the new train here is about 693 feet. I think that's 20, or it's about 20 feet, maybe it's 30 feet. I have to look that up again. It's either 20, it's only about 20 or 30 feet longer than a legacy Acela, okay, is all it is. So we've actually been able to rearrange the space on board with the restrooms align the doorways differently, and everything. So we actually get a lot more benefit out of the same footprint, because don't forget the other thing that we have to do. I don't really have too many pictures of this in today's presentation, but we've got the maintenance facilities already built. Unless I want to start jackhammering a lot of concrete out of the maintenance facilities right now. In some places I just don't have the room, for example, in Boston or Sunnyside, I'm just running out of space. I really don't have a lot of space to extend those maintenance facilities longitudinally, but I can make it work for an extra 20 or 30 feet. We can adapt it very easily without spending $1 billion to do that, but in this configuration, we go from 304 people per train to 386 people per train. So there she is. All right, there she is. And I kind of find it impressive here that you look at it, because it's got all those cars on it. It makes it seem like it really is longer than it really is. But you see here on this thing, it really only stretches about 2 catenary pole lengths. And that's on the Susquehanna Bridge, down in Perryville, Maryland. Most folks are familiar with that pretty famous place, excuse me, on the Northeast Corridor. But, rule of thumb, here's a little railroader's trick, rule of thumb here, is each one of those poles from pole to pole, roughly that's 3 car lengths. That's 3 85-foot cars, right? And so what did I say the legacy Acela was? It's about 6, right? So there you go. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plus the 2 power cars. So it's roughly pretty similar in size if you look at it to the legacy Acela fleet. But but it's it actually is a nice looking train. So one other thing to notice, if you take a look at this train here, there's no pantograph up on the front power car. All right. The Acela, the legacy Acela, always had a pantograph up in the front and a pantograph up in the back. What would happen is when you get 2 pantographs going down the railroad, let's suppose this train is moving south, going to the left, and that front pantograph actually had been up on the lead part of the train. So it's all good. The pantograph's touching the wire. But what happens is when that pantograph goes along that wire, it starts to shake it. The wire becomes excited, right? It starts bouncing because, you just put some energy. A pantograph came in and pushed the wire up as it's moving down the track at 90 or 100 or 150 miles an hour. It's pushing the wire up. So what happens is the wire starts bouncing, and the pantograph that's on the back end of the train has a hard time keeping up with it. Now the wire's bouncing and it tries to get on there, and then you start causing sparks and electrical stuff. If you ever notice, go look at YouTube videos of the Acela, you'll always see that rear pantograph is always sparking more than the one in the front. That's because the wire is excited there. So in a new train design, one of the great things about the new train design is that there's a power bus that runs along the whole train. So the catenary voltage goes through the whole train, so that both power cars are live and only one pantograph is up. And even if that back pantograph gets in trouble on the rear power car, guess what? If I can get the train out of the trouble area, I can get rid of the one on the back. I can put the one up on the front, and I can go on my way, because hopefully, being that far away, it'll be out from underneath any of the damage, that may have occurred, should there be a problem with the catenary. So you'll see it, and folks started noticing it when the pictures first started showing up on Facebook and YouTube. The thing only runs with one pantograph, but both power cars are under power at the same time. So yet another advantage in the design. And, something that the TGV folks, are awesome thought about, when they design this. You go to Japan too, you'll see the same thing on the Shinkansen trains, only one pantograph. There's more than one on the train as a redundancy measure, but only one is being used, and you run the high power bus along the train to kind of keep everything working right. So another big feature of the train that's different is what we call articulation. Okay. And folks may or may not understand what articulation is, but in articulation, that's where you have a set of wheels. Overseas, they call it a bogie. In the United States, we call it a truck. All right. But there's a set of axles, though. And each car, typically speaking, on the conventional passenger fleet, in the United States, has 2 trucks per car. It. The old heavyweights had it. Sometimes it's 4 axle, sometimes a 6 axle car. In this case, though, the bogie is actually shared between the 2 cars. You can see right here, this is between, I think, PV1 and PV2, where I took this picture here. It is actually shared between the 2. So what that does is, although my train is what I say is 20 to 30 feet longer, where I had 36 axles on the legacy Acela, I'm down to 28 axles. So less axles means less rolling resistance, means greater stability on the train, also means greater fuel efficiency as well, and better ride quality, for all those reasons. Especially when folks know, if you remember, where don't you want to sit on the train, or have the sleeping bedroom on the train? You don't ever want to be over the wheels, right? Or it's okay, but it's is less favorable, you know. Well, this train, though, because it's articulated, it rides much better. You don't get all that banging around with the drawbar, you know, between the cars and stuff. All of that is eliminated. It's a nice tight connection, and it rides better. It tracks better. And even the TGV, if folks remember, you know, about 20 years or so, maybe it was 30 years ago, the TGV had a derailment, a high-speed derailment. I think the train's moving 180 miles an hour. There was an old, like, World War I cave that kind of collapsed underneath the track. The track gave way. The TGV derailed at speed, but everything stayed all upright in line. Everybody was safe. No injuries. It just everything. It was a nice tight train, and you know that's the same benefit that you get from articulation here. Cuts down the axle, better ride quality, everything.
Chris,
Yeah.
there's one question in the Q&A that is
Sure.
sort of on point to your last slide about the running with just a single pantograph up. What happens when a train gets to a gap in the catenary, like at Coscob Bridge?
Well, it'll work the same way. Okay, it works the same way, and the pantograph stays up. And at Coscob, I don't think I have a picture. I can't find a picture easily. The wire at Coscob is actually built with a curve. So the wire kind of goes up, and it extends up to a tower. And basically, the pantograph is designed. It's got a maximum reach. I forget if it's like 23 feet. I forget exactly what the maximum reach of the pantograph is. So at some point in time, the pantograph is just going to go up. It won't go up any higher. So at Coscob, there's sort of like a glide path. It goes up, and the pantograph just kind of slides out. It coasts across, and when it gets to the other side, I'm trying to do this in the mirror in the camera here. The pantograph just sort of catches it, and then it rides back down, and it just catches it on the way back down again. So there's no difference in the function for the pantograph versus this train versus any other pantograph that was up there. The E60s did it. The M2s did it. The only one that didn't work, actually, believe it or not, was the GG1s, because that big, massive pantograph was built out of like gas pipe, I think, you know, and that pantograph that was like a monster pantograph the Gs had. The Gs actually were required to drop it when they went over Coscob Bridge, if you look at the old timetables and stuff. But everything else, it just glides up and catches it on the other side. So hopefully I answered the question there. So anyway, we talked about articulation. And so as you can see then, you know, you can see kind of a little bit of a better view here with the business. This is one of the business class cars, PV9. This is PV9 here. You know, you can see how it is where the car is connected there. Now, at the end though, so where you connect to the power car itself is unto itself. It's got, as they say in Europe, traction bogies, or we call them, you know, powered combos, if you will. It's got the powered wheels are only underneath the power cars. There's no powered wheels, not like the ICE 3 train has a distributed power traction bogies, as they say, throughout the train. You know, our bogies are only powered underneath the power cars here. As you can see right here, you know, and that's actually the power car itself is standalone. It is not articulated. The power car can be taken off the train set. Everything else, the cars themselves are articulated together, but the power cars are technically separate units. And yeah, this is what it is though. Four axles powered on this end, 4 axles on the other end, just like the legacy Acela. But the beauty of it too, though, in this newer technology, is this thing is much lighter on its feet. Okay, this thing is much lighter on its feet. For the folks who remember David Gunn, who I've known for a long time, was a great friend of Amtrak here, as he was the you know, president here for Amtrak. He described that Acela, though, you know, due to a number of things. I didn't really come here today to talk about FRA crashworthiness stuff, but as he described that Acela, though, it was built to a different standard at a different time, and he called it nothing but a high velocity bank vault. Is how he called it. Even you go into the cab, there's this big steel I-beam that's right in the middle of the cab. It's like riding in an army tank. So the beauty of the new Acela set, though, is it's much lighter on the feet, built with a more modern technology. Here's an interesting fact, though. Actually, here's an interesting fact: the legacy Acela goes 150 miles an hour, but with the weight of that train, okay, with the weight of that power car, it's heavier than this. It's heavier on its feet. By the time that thing goes 150 miles an hour, it causes as much stress on the track as like a loaded coal train or a loaded coal car, maybe not the whole train, but a loaded coal car, you know, running over that with a 283,000 pound, you know, car of coal running across the track. People don't realize that because the forces, the energy that is created, the faster you go, it starts going up exponentially though, but it just causes issues for ride quality It causes issues for, track maintenance, too. So this thing will be that's why this thing should be better, all the way around. We're looking forward to it. So just because it works in Europe doesn't mean it'll work here. So we have to do some tests. So how do we test it? This is how. Study that, everybody. There'll be a quiz at the end. This is how you do it. Now, seriously, I just threw this in here because, frankly, this is legitimate. This is a legitimate flow chart. Starting on the top left, how do you wind up with FRA approval, though? There's multiple steps and multiple processes to go through. We are not going to go through all this tonight, although everybody's going to be in bed early then. If I do, everybody will fall asleep on me. But it is quite a complicated process. But what I will do is I'm going to talk about a few different things that we do. And what you see is you see the train running around right now. You guys see it on YouTube. It's been up in Boston already. It's been, I've had it up in, we've been running around in Maryland and Delaware this week. It's been running in Jersey a lot, but we're doing a couple things. So I'm going to talk about what it is we're doing to kind of satisfy some of these conditions that you see here in this flow chart. So don't worry about memorizing this here. All right. So there's a couple things, though. This is a nice little chart here. It's no Greek letters, right? I did promise no Greek letters, but it starts to get a little more complicated. So we're going to talk about a couple different things here, because one of the things that we are focused on, Amtrak, the Northeast Corridor, United States, we don't have railroad that's straight and flat and built to 180 mile an hour standards like you do when you go to Germany, when you go to Japan, when you go to China, or any of those places with Spain, any of those places with the really high-speed rail. So, we are still operating off an infrastructure. In some cases, our infrastructure, you guys will probably notice on the phone, I don't remember, but Canton Junction Viaduct, right? Second oldest viaduct in the United States, 1830 something or 1840 something. I forget the date, right? But we're still operating. We're still operating over stuff like that. We are forced to, because we just don't have the investment available to us to build these new high-speed lines. So, we have a lot of curves, okay? And how do you get that train to perform on the curves? It's all about trip time. So we're going to talk a little bit about curves. Curves is very real. For the folks who are in Boston, a lot of folks that are in New England here know that shoreline. It's got a lot of curves on it, and there's a thing called cant deficiency. And I'll talk about what cant deficiency is, and hopefully not too scientific terms, okay? But the FRA, this is an FRA thing here. I don't know, and Dave or something, can you see my cursor on the screen when I move it over here? Does this show up? I don't know if it does or not.
Yes, I do see it, Chris.
Okay, all right. So, up at the top here, we've got speed track class. Class 1 track is good for 15 for passenger. Class 2 track is good for 30. Class 3, Class 4, Class 7 track, 125, 160, Class 9. So these are all the track classes, in FRA, and they come with their own set of requirements. So if we're going to operate in the lower speed, in some cases, we don't need to do any special testing or simulations, okay? But once you get sort of above the 90 mile an hour mark, then all of a sudden, all these requirements are going to start, coming into question here. So don't worry about studying all this, but just the faster you go, kind of the more testing you have to do. And we're going to understand, this is a little bit of math here. We're going to talk about this, cant deficiency. So when the cant deficiency is running under 3 inches, that's the term we use. I'll talk about what that is. Basically, you're okay. A lot of stuff runs. The average passenger train, the average MBTA commuter train, they're all allowed 3 inches of cant deficiency. 3 to 5, it has some more requirements, 3 to 6. Then once you go above 6, then you do have to do all this. And once you go above 6 and you're operating upper speed here, everything in testing kicks in. So we'll talk about what some of this is, but just understand the faster you go straight, the more testing you got to do. Or the faster you go through curves, that's what this means, more testing you have to do. And we'll talk about some of those, what some of that means here, all right? So hopefully I'm not putting you guys to sleep here now, but let's talk about what is cant deficiency. So everybody knows, and everybody's felt cant deficiency. So think about it when you're driving when you're driving your car down the interstate, when you're driving down, the highway or any other road, you come to a curve, okay? What happens if you go really fast through the curve? What happens? You feel like you're being kind of thrown to the outside of the curve, okay? That's actually underbalance, okay? You're underbalanced when you get thrown to the outside. What happens if you're on a curve and the road is kind of tilted, so you're going kind of slow, but the road's a little bit banked and you fall to the inside? That's overbalance. And balance is perfectly fine. Balance is, you're right there in equilibrium. So cant deficiency is a way to talk about how hard are you being kind of pushed to the outside of that curve? How hard is that? You know, we have to be able to identify it with a scientific value so we can say, okay, not only is it safe, you know, to operate the train like that, but it's also comfortable for the people. Frankly, you know, we could run the trains down the track pretty fast and the trains will have no problem staying on the track. Okay. I mean, but it's going to be going like, I'm going to date myself now, right? But it's going to be going like a ride on the super duper looper over there at Hershey Park, because I'm a Pennsylvania guy, right? You know, and, you know, although the train will stay on the track, you know, if you're a passenger, you don't feel like your laptop just slid off the table onto the floor and you don't want to be wearing your coffee. So we have limits that we put on cant deficiency and what we can control. Okay. So, you know, cant deficiency here, you know, or underbalance is, you know, when you're in a curve, you know, you can overbalance. That's when you fall to the inside. You know, overbalance is, or balance is when you feel perfectly flat. You know, when you feel perfectly flat, and underbalance is when you're being pushed to the outside of the curve. So just kind of keep that in mind. You know, so what we do is we go through and figure out, you know, what the right cant deficiency on the track is. I know this is a lot of scientific stuff, so let's really translate it to what it means. We define it in terms of inches. It's a long mathematic formula. We can talk a little bit more in the Q&A session if folks want to understand details. But like, so what does it really mean for the trains then? Okay, because different trains are different equipment. So let's do this. What does it really mean? Okay. So here's a set of curves at Elizabeth, New Jersey. All right. So this particular picture here is February 1975. The RTG turbo train, folks, was just off the boat. First trip, maiden voyage. It just came off the boat, shipped over from France, and was on its way to Philly or something. We're going to go do some testing with it. Here it is at Elizabeth, New Jersey. One of the famous curves. You see lots of pictures taken Elizabeth. We've got 3 different speed limits, believe it or not, on the curve, on this particular curve here. So when you're operating at a 3-inch cant deficiency, all right, the speed is basically 55 miles an hour. So I can operate. New Jersey Transit operates at 3 inches around that curve. Heritage equipment, private cars all operate 3 inches. The basic passenger train car in the United States can operate at 3 inches by federal regulation anywhere you want to go. So that means when you go around the curve, you're going to feel a slight pull to the outside of it, but you won't feel like you're, you know, on straight track, but you won't be falling to the inside of it either. So that's about 3 inches. Okay. 5 inches. All right. Look at that. The speed limit for the 5 inches on this curve, this is a valid speed limit, is 70 miles an hour. So an ACS 64, P42s, Chargers, Ampli cars, Horizons, all this equipment is allowed to operate on the Northeast Corridor at 5-inch cant deficiency. That's because we've gone through all sorts of this testing, tested suspension. It's got superior suspension to it. Okay. And, you know, and it is very well within safety limits, you know, because the faster you go, the more time I can shave off the schedule. And then the Acela, okay, which has a tilting device on it, the tilt train, whether it's the legacy Acela or the new Acelas, folks know the train tilts. We actually authorized to operate up to a 7-inch cant deficiency speed. And so the Acela on the very same curve, right, has an 80 mile per hour speed limit on that very same curve. So this is all in the Amtrak timetable here. So depending on what type of equipment it is, the engineer's qualified and they know what speed limit they're allowed to operate, you know, on this track here. You know, this is what cant deficiency is all about, you know, and obviously the faster you run the train, the less scheduled time it takes to get there. Okay. Just very simply put, you know, like I said, I'll go into math later. Folks want to understand some more stuff about this. I don't want to take too much time, you know, on this here with everybody. So, so what do we have to do? You know, to get a train to go, we got to do any number of different things. The first thing we're going to do is we look at the design of the equipment, the springs, the wheels, all sorts of that. We make a model simulation, right? Then after we do the model, we're going to do static testing to verify some stuff. Just stand still, make sure, did the model get it right? Just because you put it, I don't know how many computer programmers are on here, just because the computer says it doesn't mean it's right, because garbage in, garbage out, right? So we have to do testing to verify what the model tells us. So first of all, we do static testing, you know, and then we do dynamic testing, we do validation, and eventually we get the approval. So I'm going to talk about 2 pieces of this today here, and not going to do too much. So we'll talk about a little bit about what we do with the static testing to verify the model works. Then we're going to talk a little bit about how we do our dynamic testing, which is all a lot of stuff that we do here. Static testing, okay? So one of the things we need to do is a lean test, okay? So when we lean the car over, is not a drop test. Anybody who's looking at this, it is not a drop test. Okay, this is a lean test. And, so this is a picture of one of the newer cat baggage cars a few years ago up in the factory. And, I'm sorry, I said Hornell, New York. That's actually up in Elmira. So that's a typo here. But it's actually in Elmira. And, we're going to do the lean test. So we actually had to pick the car up. We placed a set of test jigs underneath it. So now the car is supported on these hydraulic test jigs, which we can actually do some, stuff with this. And then what we do with the hydraulics, we actually can lift the wheels. You see the hydraulic rams underneath there? We can test it and we can put certain limits into it. We want to make sure when you start to lift the car on one side, how does that suspension engage? Does the suspension catch it? Does it let it tip too much more? How much car body roll do you get? We look at all this stuff, just, not even dynamically, but just let's go see what all those springs and trucks and the bolsters and all that stuff is doing here, just to make sure, first of all, before we even take it on a piece of railroad, we understand, what it's going to do. So we'll take it up there, put it on the test jig, and we lean it over. All right. We lean it. As you can see, we're probably leaning at a good 6 inches there. The one wheel is higher than the other wheel. And then we measure all sorts of stuff in the car body. How much did it lean? Because you're allowed certain parameters, because it can't all of a sudden get all loosey-goosey and then all of a sudden start, going somewhere where it shouldn't. We have strict limits on what we can do. And so we measure all that stuff, and put that together as a car body and lean. How do the wheels and the trucks work with that car body? The other thing we do is we actually do some wheel load equalization. So we can lift up and move a couple wheels around. But what we want to make sure of, if everybody sees, there's typically, most of our equipment's all got 4 wheels or 2 axles in a truck. Well, what happens if one axle that finds a piece of rail that's kind of a little bit screwy or it's high or it's low or something like that? We need to make sure we understand how does the load that's on that truck equalize among the rest of the wheels? Because what you don't want to have happen is, if you drip something down too low, you don't want the high wheel to kind of pop off the track because it could cause a derailment, if it winds up coming into something there. So we want to make sure, though, that, if one of the wheels has some type of issue with it, the load is still sort of equalized around the rest of the truck, that the truck is flexible enough. It can divert the forces to kind of safely keep that car on the track, to kind of keep it out, from coming under the track here. So there's a lot more stuff we do, but I just want to kind of give you a couple examples, though. But we actually do take the car, we kind of lean it over, we do all sorts of measurements with it, just to make sure we understand what it's doing. We've done this with the equipment. We do ACS 64s, we do it with the Acela, we do it with the new Acela, the old Acela. We do this with all of our equipment, even some of the commuter equipment, even believe it or not, you guys are all up there in Boston, even those MBB cars, which one I'm talking about, right? Those 1,500 cab cars up there in Boston, even they just actually have gone through recently through a lean test, and they did pass, believe it or not. They don't look like they would. I'm sorry if there's anybody from the T on here, but they did pass, though, and they're just fine. And we actually the T did some testing with some of these just recently to change some qualifications on those cars. So anyway, after we do the static testing, then we go into dynamic testing, and there's all sorts of things we have to do. Make up a test plan. We got to get instrumentation together, operations on a railroad. We're doing speed tests. We're going to talk about a couple of these different things here, as well here. So, the first thing we're going to do is instrumented wheels. I don't know if anybody's seen a set of instrumented wheels up close. This is what they look like, okay? So this is a very special set of wheels. And what we actually do, the instrumented wheels are designed to measure how much down force, side force, up, all these different forces are on the wheel. So we take this wheel here and we take as much steel off this wheel as we can, okay? We're going to make, so you see all the instrumentation that's on there. That is, or actually, let me use the pointer here. All this instrumentation is kind of on the plate of the wheel. So this wheel has been machined down to make that plate as thin as it possibly is. Once you take metal off and it becomes thinner, guess what? It becomes more flexible, okay? And so, but we make it still so it's safe. There's not too much meat going on it. And all these are strain gauges on here so that when the wheel is rotating, we are measuring all the forces on the wheels. We can measure up force, down force, left force, right force, and all the different ways of access, because we want to be able to know how much force is that train applying to that wheel. And as we go through the curves, I mean, you're not going to have some guy hanging out the side of the train going around the curve at 130 miles an hour, right? So we have instrumentation that does this. And you know, and it sends it to a, I'll show you guys what it looks like, a little command center on the car here. So we monitor all the forces. We start at a slower speed, and if it passes that, we go to the next faster speed, next faster speed, next faster speed, as we run it back and forth. This is an older set of wheels, actually. This is an older set of wheels where there's actually a wired hub, you know, going to it. It's an older picture. Believe it or not, I swear to God, the new stuff, like on the new Acela train, it's actually Bluetooth connected. All right, so you have all these gauges here, but there's actually a Bluetooth actually on there, Bluetooth connection that goes to a junction box, which feeds into the new Acela train. It's a little bit simpler here, but this is a great picture of all the gauges uncovered before they put all the goop on it to kind of seal the stuff in. But, you know, this is what an instrumented wheel set looks like, and this is how we make sure that the trains are safe when we run these things at ultra high speeds to make sure they stay on the track. So in terms of the Acela, we were here to talk about the Acela today. You know, we've got instrumental wheel sets. This is actually train set 2 downstairs in Penn Coachard. You know, it's running around each day, and you can see all the different wires coming up from all sorts of different. We've got sensors all over the place on this thing. You know, and you can see there's a temporary rack that you can see kind of inside the machine room door here with computers and terminals and stuff. And then we take, you know, that information, you know, package it up, and then we've got all sorts of wires running throughout the train here, so we can transmit it to all the monitoring stations, you know, from all the varieties. There's sensors all over this train here, between truck temperatures, wheels, airbags, everything is instrumented up so we can make sure it's safe. Here's a closer picture of the truck. It's a little bit difficult to see because all the other stuff's in the way, but this is an instrumental wheel set here. And here's where some of the signals are, you know, coming off, and some of the other instrumentation that's on this truck here. This is actually on the production set. So like I said, we take all these signals and all these sensors on this train, we feed it back, you know, onto the test train, and we set up a station. So this picture here is actually from probably 1999, 1998. From the legacy Acela train. So you sort of recognize the overhead luggage rack in the windows, but if you notice, though, we've got, you know, kind of like folding tables, laptop. Look at those old computer monitors. You can tell it's from 1998. There's that Windows 98 machine right there. But this is our test center. As you can see, it's situated, you know, with computer rack, and you can see how we stabilize the computer rack for movement on the train. Yeah, everything is sort of tied down, by the way, you know, for a moving train here. And this is where we monitor all that stuff from. You know, this was in legacy Acela, and this is actually in train set number 2 that's over in Pueblo. So a little bit less wires. The inside of this, you can see the inside of the train. I'll show you a couple more pictures in a minute here, the inside. But, you know, we've got these workstations set up, plywood, wires coming in, the lights, the HVAC work, but a lot of the other the other parts of the train are just not completed yet for these test trains. So the third train set is going to come out of the factory at Hornell here in another month or two. That one will be the first one that's equipped with all of the passenger compartments in it. Most of the train set 1, which is in Pueblo, and train set 2, which is here, you know, is not quite set up that way yet. So as you can see, this is actually what it looks like inside. Here's a picture I took of inside train set 2 the other day. You know, because, you know, we are testing real life conditions, we actually do have cinder blocks in here for added weight. We've got water barrels for other stuff to actually make sure we have a load on it, because you're not going to get the same test results if you kind of fly around on, you know, with an empty car. It won't be a true representation. So we actually do have additional weight loaded into it. But you can see this is mostly unfinished inside, though, as we do stuff. And you can see wires running around on the floors. There's all sorts of instrumentation in it, you know, as well for some of this stuff.
A question, Chris.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
the set that came up to Boston,
Yep.
that was equipped like this, was all the test equipment?
So the set that came out to Boston, it was this very set you see a picture of on the screen right now. Okay. That's actually the first train set 2. So if you actually got to look inside the window, if you were lucky enough to see it at South Station or something on the platform there, you know, this is what you would have seen inside. Okay. And actually this picture here is actually train set 1, but train set 2 is almost identical. It's got a big plywood thing. The table looks the same. People are different, but they're all sitting there with their computers all spread out. We have a few more monitors actually hung up in train set 2 than they do in this picture. But yeah, it's almost identical inside, identical condition. So. Hey, one other thing here too, which is interesting here. I took this picture. It's difficult to see on the screen here, but I'm standing in one power car. But because it is an articulated train, you know, you can see through the doorway here. You can see from car to car to car. It's like one big long open tunnel as you see it through here. Okay, it's one big long open tunnel, and you know, because the rest of it's not finished yet. You know, but it's really different than having individual cars set up. It's like one big train car, frankly. All right. Now, not all a train set 2. This is the train set the boss you're looking at in this picture. And so is this. Okay, so is this. So one or two of the cars have been kind of test fitted. This actually happens to be a piece of the first class car. You know, what it's going to look like in there. You know, with some of the pieces, obviously it's not all finished, but they did put some seats into it. And, you know, this particular car also has a restroom in it because obviously the test crew's on there. Sometimes you're on there for hours a night, so you do need a working bathroom. And the HVAC does work through the whole train, so you're not sitting there stifling in the heat. The air conditioning works well, and it does a nice job. The heat works well. You know, but this kind of sort of starts to get you to the flavor of what it's going to look like inside here. Okay. The other thing
Chris,
too,
were the water barrels intended to simulate passenger loads?
yes, yes. Yep, that's exactly what it is. It's just a cheaper, easier way to add weight, okay? Because in the old days, what you used to do is they used to get these sandbags, and those were you had to carry all these 50-pound sandbags on. You kind of threw them in the seats, you throw them on the carpet. Sometimes they'd break open. You know, it was just it was aggravated. The water barrel's easy. You can see each barrel's got a valve on it, so you can control precisely the weight that you want. You hook a hose up to it, and then I'm not sure how they drain it yet because I haven't been there for the big draining here. But it's just the water barrel is easier to deal with water than carrying bags and bags of sand. That it's just a little better ergonomically here. So, first class car. One other thing I was going to say about this, though, of the interior of the train, is that one thing that I actually was struck me is, you know, every passenger car that I've been used to basically in my career is all 85 feet long, right? And you know, remember there were 6 of them on the Acela. Now with this new Acela, there's 9 cars. That means with almost the same footage, the cars are shorter. And actually, I found it's a much more homey feel on board. You know, like when you get on an Acela train or a regional train, it's 85 feet, and all you see is like, you know, 85 feet of people, and like, where am I going to sit? It just feels crowded. This definitely has much more of a homey feel to it, more of a private feeling to it. You know, when you get on these shorter cars, you know, you don't see this big tunnel you're not looking at because the cars are shorter and the way the hallway kind of staggers around the restrooms and everything. So it's actually going to be pretty nice, I think. You know, it's more of a homey feeling. Okay. And I'll tell you what, it rides better too. I think it's going to ride better too, you know, with this technology. So how do we do dynamic tests on the railroad, right? What do you got on the railroad? Pre-COVID, there's trains, especially in this Northeast corridor, there's trains everywhere, you know. Track work happens, right? You're always fighting with some track work. And in the event, go work at nighttime. Well, guess what? If the track work's not happening, there's freight trains happening, especially down here in this area. We have some more freight traffic than up there. They're always getting in the way of stuff. And so it becomes difficult to find windows for dynamic testing somehow. So how do we do it? What's the best way to do dynamic testing? So one of the things that Amtrak does is a lot of times we send our equipment out to Pueblo, Colorado. TTCI, Transportation Test Center Incorporated, just outside of Pueblo, Colorado. It's there's a massive test facility out here. It's run by the AAR, and they've got a loop here. It's about a 14 or so mile loop. It's qualified for speeds up to 160 miles per hour. So this is a picture that I took out there. What year was I out there? It must have been 2013. I guess it must have been 2013 is when we took this trip. We went out there for the ACS 64. It had just being tested out there. We had it out there for a month or two. We sent 8 Ampli cars out there, as you can see, had to put some passenger cars behind it. And we ran it around on the test track. They were able to fine tune traction, just because the first time this engine is built for these voltages in the US. So, you still have to fine tune stuff, and you don't want to be taking a test engine out there and have something happen to the test. Next thing you know, you're sitting in the middle of the high speed track and here comes the 12 o'clock Acela. You're in the way. Not a good thing. So we routinely send stuff to Pueblo, send it to the test track out there, work out some of the kinks before we go to the next phase, which I'll talk about what that is. And, it's a nice structured place. You can scientifically do stuff, do experiments with it, have a controlled environment. You can simulate things out there, and you're not going to get anybody's way. The only thing that's out there that's in your way is a bunch of prairie dogs, frankly. They say rattlesnakes too. I've never seen a rattlesnake out there, but I've seen about 1 million prairie dogs every time I've been out there. So, the ACS has been out there. Here's a picture. This is 1999. There it is. The legacy Acela was out there. We took it out there, for testing in 1999 before it came to the Northeast corridor. Wound it up. We ran around at 150, 160 miles an hour, back then. So not only that, the new Acela has been out there too. So let me pause here for a minute. I'm going to see if I can switch gears, and I'm going to show you this here. So we got a little clip here. see if I can find this. Can you guys see this okay? Can you guys come up now again?
Yep, it's there.
Okay, so let me see. So this is some shots here. Some folks may be able to see the TTCI shot some shots of, this is the train set 1. This is not the set that was in Boston. This is the other set that is still actually out there doing some testing. It's been out there since last year. Here we go. Notice you only see that one pantograph up. I don't see any prairie dogs. But you can see the whole loop there. You go way out and around. It's incredible. The 14-mile loop is right there on the property, though. It's just sort of one big, long curve as they go all the way around. But they've been testing the train out there up to 160 miles an hour, you know, as it's flying through there. And there we are. So let me go back to, where was I here? All right, we back?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. So, you know, it's nice being out there. You know, a lot of folks send their cars out there. Hey, and by the way, so on the Q&A session, somewhere I saw a long time ago, I don't know if it was in a Bradley Clark book or not. I don't know if Bradley's online here tonight, but there's a picture of a pair of the Orange Line cars, the 1200s, which are currently being retired, out there on the test track, and you see it said Forest Hills on it, and it said, and you see Pikes Peak in the background. And I cannot find where I saw that picture. So any suggestions? I would love to see another copy of that someday. But a lot of stuff goes at the Pueblo. All right. So anyhow, so we do testing at Pueblo, and then what about the Northeast Corridor? Where do we test on the Northeast Corridor? We test. Come on. Next page here. Let's see, my computer is not going forward here. Give me a second. Went backward, went forward. Where do we test on the Northeast Corridor? We test right where we've always tested. So folks may recognize this. You know, ever since these MU cars came out, I want to say this is either 64 or 65, when this is the DOT, it wasn't even the FRA yet, but the DOT T1 through T4 cars there. These were the predecessor cars built for the DOT to test out the Metroliners, okay? And here they are. That's on track 3 at Princeton Junction. Guess what track we're operating every night? Track 3. All right. And, you know, they were testing these, you know, from way back when. So what we have to do, what we do on the Northeast Corridor then is we do, first of all, we do speed upgrade testing, tangent testing for high-speed stability. How fast do we get the train to go? We need a long tangent track where the train can accelerate up to the target speed. In the Northeast Corridor, we use the racetrack. You know, basically, is that track through Princeton Junction in Hamilton, New Jersey. It basically goes from New Brunswick to Trenton is what it is. And that's where we do all of our testing. Everything we've done for the first nice straight track, we see how fast does it go, make sure that vehicle is good on the straight track at the high speed. Okay, that's the first step. The second thing we do is then we go to curve tracks. Okay, you know, so we do a set of curves where we can really kind of work the train through the curves, kind of, you know, what can we do where the track is good, that we can have a variety of speeds, that we can get up to really high, fast speeds to generate high underbalance, high cant deficiency speeds, you know, kind of where you're being, you know, kind of thrown over to the outside. You know, we push the envelope and push the limits of all these things, sort of like test pilots. Test trains, I'd say I've been on a number of them, are very fun. Okay, sometimes when you do these things. So in the Northeast Corridor, though, we use the curves at Torresdale, Pennsylvania. So here's Torresdale. It's just outside the Philadelphia. It's right inside the Philadelphia city limits. It's about, you know, 15 miles from 30th Street Station here. You know, the regulation speed here is, you know, between 3 and 5 inches. The speed is actually matched up here. A lot of the conventional equipment. This happens to be train 98 here. You know, going through there. That we go at 90 miles an hour. Although the Acela at a 7-inch speed is good for 105. You know, through here. but we crank trains up 125, 135. We'll crank them up to a lot higher speeds here because we can really push the envelope. It's a good section. You see all the concrete ties there. It's a solid piece of track. It's close to Philly. It's close to the racetrack, so it's centrally located. This is our curve testing of track, okay? So we do it on the straight track, then we do it on the curve track. Then, after we finish that, then we go to what we call representative segment testing, okay? We want to find a piece of railroad, though. It's not just a test track that's got a whole bunch of different things in it. It's got some bridges. It's got turnouts. We want to take it under concrete ties, wood ties, different kind of switches. Some switches are older. Some switches are newer. We want to be able to, get about 50 miles of railroad that does a little bit of everything just to make sure that we're looking at everything. So we've got two locations of we call it the representative segment track. So Wilmington with Reagan Interlochen just south of Wilmington down to Prairieville, and also between Cranston and Westerly. So when train set 2 was up there back in the fall, we were actually running, it came out of Boston because that's the maintenance facility, but we were actually making multiple round trips between Cranston and Westerly, Rhode Island. The High Street Interlochen is where it is. It's in Westerly, running it back and forth there. And it's going to be back again, guys. It'll be back again. I don't know exactly when, but it will be back in New England here. I don't know. It won't be this month, but maybe in another month or two. You're going to see it up there for a little while, doing some of the representative segment testing. So you can see on the map here, obviously, Providence to Westerly. You can see the north end, and you can see in the purple in the south end. Actually, from Wilmington, Philly, down to Prairieville, is where we do the segment testing there. And as always, once again, we send everything to Pueblo. Guess what else we do? We test everything on the representative segment. So the Siemens Venture cars, or the the Cali cars, we call them also. These are the new Siemens cars that are going to California. We tested them. We qualified them here, on the representative segment. This is a test train we did, running it around because there's not a lot of railroad outside the Northeast Corridor. We can get some stuff good to 125. Okay. And so a lot of things come here. So we brought the Midwest cars here to test. Here's the Midwest Charger, right? The 4604, that's an Illinois DOT-owned unit. We're qualifying it up to 125. There's a test train there, right? Guess who else wanted to do some testing? Jersey Transit. They want to do some testing. Guess what we did? We brought the Alp 45 dual mode. You see that 4529 right there, and there's an Alp 46, I think, on the rear end pushing it, the two engines together, doing the testing there. Mark wanted to do some testing. There it is, the Mark Charger, or the Mark Chargers were doing some of their own testing up there as well. And then lastly, of course, here's the Acela operating on that south end representative track as well, moving around. This is, on the track between Bacon and a place called Prince down there in Maryland. So, we have to test out all these tracks and, to get all the vehicle qualifications done. And, once it passes all those tests, then you can say, okay, is it safe to go or is it good to go here? And Dave, I want to watch my time here. I got a few more slides here. I don't want to keep people up too late. So let me see how quickly I can go through the rest of the stuff, and then we can take a breath here, I guess. You just yell at me if I need to stop somewhere. Okay. So anyway, there's one more thing that goes into how determining how fast the train goes. And I personally find this interesting. Okay. For the folks who know railroading, who think everything about railroading, and all the folks out west, Union Pacific, BNSF, CSX, NS, they all do a great job of railroading. But here at Amtrak, we have a fourth dimension. Okay, there's a fourth dimension of railroading here at Amtrak, and I don't know if folks can guess what it is. Okay, but it also determines what do we do with train speed. Unlike anywhere else, it's the catenary system. Okay, it also dictates a whole lot of stuff here. The OCS, overhead contact system, also called catenary. And the pantograph is actually a device on the top of the train that does it. Now, we got some issues in the Northeast Corridor that we're working through to get these trains to go fast. So I'm going to show you a couple different things here about fixed and variable tension catenary. Okay, so a fixed termination catenary. This is a catenary like on the south end of the corridor from Washington, D.C. So here we go. We got 4 poles. Okay, it's a 60-degree day, average temperature. There's no wind, noise in the conductors. So there's about 5,000 pounds of tension holding these wires all together here. Okay, 5,000 pounds of tension to hold these wires together. And they're all they're bolted on here, they're bolted here, bolted here, bolted here. All right, well, for the folks who know physics, and you can think about it in your high school physics class, what happens when things heat up? What happens to metal when you apply heat to it? What happens is you get expansion. And guess what happens? As the sun heats up on a 100-degree day, you get thermal expansion. All of a sudden, that 5,000 pounds of tension is down to 30,000 pounds of tension. And now the wire starts drooping between these poles. Remember I said it was 3 car lengths, so you may have 200 feet, 200 plus feet between each of these poles. The wire starts sagging, and guess what happens if the wire sags too much? That pantograph comes off the wire. Okay, so that's an issue for us, and that's going to dictate speed. You know, especially in this weather here with these older wires here, it's much more difficult with these wires with the fixed. Everything is fixed in termination here. The wires will sag. Not only do they sag, but guess what happens if you look at that 30,000 pounds, right? It was 5, now it's 3,000 pounds. Guess what happens when it gets chilly out? When it goes to winter time, right? It pulls in. All of a sudden, your tension jets up to 7,000 pounds of wire. So either, you know, the cables are very stiff, they can break, right, because there's so much tension there, or in some cases, though, you can cause damage to the poles, especially if you don't have steel poles. One railroad had some wooden poles one day, and they had some trouble because they just couldn't hold on. A wooden pole was only worth about 4,000 pounds of tension. Once you got about 4,000 pounds, they all started getting yanked in, and that's not good either. So this is what our Washington, D.C. to New York looks like, and this is some of the issues here, and I'll tell you why that's important when you come to speeds here in just a minute. What do we do about it, okay? You know, folks remember, you know, some of these wires here, this is a PRR photograph, so second point is, so during the Q&A session, let's see if anybody can identify where this location is. But it is actually down here. This is a Pennsylvania railroad setup, though, somewhere on the on this end of the railroad. But you can see, you know, the technology that was there at the time with the way it's tied onto the wire here. The wires are all these rigid wires that comes a steady span that goes across the tracks and everything that hangs out here. Okay, pretty good system. I'll tell you what, it's worked great. There's a catenary pole outside my house. It's over 100 in 2021. It's 106 years old this year. It was put up in 1915, and it's still there. It's leaning over a little bit, but it's still there. Okay. Up the north end in Boston, though, we've got constant tension wires. So in constant tension, you know, we've got a wire that's kind of here. It's got a pulley and it's got a counterweight. So we adjust it to 4,400 pounds of tension and the cable is nice and flat. There it is at 4,400 pounds of tension. So guess what happens? Let's go take that same 60-degree day. We heat it up to 110. Guess what? What happens is the weight goes up, and guess what? Still 4,400 pounds. Guess what? Still flat. Still is good riding wire. The pulleys move, and the wire. I'm sorry, the pulley didn't go up. It went down here when we expanded thermally, and the wire stayed flat. Let's take that same chilly day, right? All right. There it goes, right? Let's say here. Did I go down here a page? There it is on the cool day, right? Still at 4,400 pounds. In this case, the wire contracts, the wire remains flat. Jersey high-speed rail's got some of this, as well as New England. It just really helps out a lot, as you can see here. And there it goes, you know, as it contracts here and everything. It's really a great system, you know, and it's the newest style technology. That's what the Europeans use a lot, and that's what's important to Amtrak, and that's really how we get the high speed out of it. You really need this kind of catenary to be able to make it useful. You know, here's a picture here. You know, obviously you can see what it looks like with these registration arms and assemblies here. I want to say this picture is up at Niantic River. It looks like it's right at Niantic right before we put this is still in the old alignment before we cut the new bridge in. But you can see here on the pole with the pulleys, and you can see the weights and everything, and these weights will move up and down depending on what the temperature is. So I can see the green on the trees here. I can see the weights are further down. That tells me this picture is probably taken in the summertime, you know, around here. Okay. So constant tension means it moves, all right? And, you know, this really is a big difference for us because when you have this fixed point here, it's a hard wired into the thing. The wires will sag when it gets hot. With the pulleys, the wire doesn't sag, okay? But it becomes very expensive to do this and to kind of change these wires out. One of the things that Amtrak has been doing here is we have been changing in New Jersey territory is we are taking some of the older wires, but we're putting these new, we call them SAP assemblies. SAP, I don't know where that came from. It's been the Pennsylvania Railroad called them SAP assemblies. It has nothing to do with the software company, by the way, for anybody who runs SAP, Amtrak. I guess we do run SAP, but not in the catenary, we don't, okay? But actually what this does, though, is with this arm here, it actually allows some more flexibility here, the wire to move around, and we can actually get some higher speed out of the wires here. You know, in New Jersey, and we can actually do some other stuff here with this. So what does that all mean here? So with the fixed tension, right? Basically, our limit is about 135 miles an hour we can get out of the fixed tension. The temperature varies with temperature. The rigid wire is difficult sometimes to ride at the higher speeds. There's miles of it out here, though. Did I say miles, right? There's tons of it on the old PRR setup here. And it's very pricey and disruptive to change out on a live railroad, okay? Constant tension is the modern standard, it's good, definitely up to 160 or more. If you ever want to go more someday, this is the standard that they use over in Europe at 180 for their 200-mile stretch, for 200-mile-an-hour stretches. It allows for the constant tension. It tracks easier on the wire, and you get much better performance. And with the SAPs, though, we've been able to do some stuff. So, we can speed upgrade. We can go from 135 to 145. We can't quite get to 160, but we think we can do 145 on some of this stuff here. But every mile per hour counts, but it's significantly less expensive. We're trying to figure out then, we'd love to have everything upgraded to this, but the time and the resources we have available to do it, just don't, lend itself to that. And we're working on ways that maybe we can get a quicker bang for our buck. We could raise the speeds here to 145 in some cases, which is what we're planning to do, in certain places here with the catenary. So we talked about trains, the testing, the catenary. We're doing some stuff with the catenary right now. We're testing this out, and we'll hopefully have some upgraded speeds. And it's our intention right now that when we inaugurate the new Acela equipment, we'll be good for 160. That'll be the new speed limit, for example, in Kingston for you guys up in Boston. 160 will be the new limit through Mansfield. Also, it'll go from 150 to 160. When we start the service up there, that's the goal.
Okay.
And
Chris,
yes.
excuse me. So, if anybody has a guess as to the location of that vintage photograph of the Pennsylvania Railroad catenary, type it into the chat. There's a little box down at the bottom of your screen if you're on Zoom, a little dialogue bubble there. Open that up and type your guess in there, and when Chris finishes the program, we'll go through and see if anybody got the right answer.
Okay.
Likewise, if any, we have one guess as to the location for the opening slide of.
Okay, good. I was going to say, don't forget about that one.
If anybody else has a guess on that, put it up there in the chat. Right. I'm watching that.
All right, good. Yeah, great. Yeah, I can't see the chat either, Dave, so I'm going to count on you because I got the slideshow going here. So
yeah, okay.
So I am almost at the end. Hopefully, I'm not boring you guys to death too much here. But so anyway, let's go talk about the last thing is really, it's only one or two last slides here, is about the teams. Okay. So that's all the railroad technical stuff, but I do want to make sure I'm not going to spend too much time on this because it is getting late here. It takes a lot of teamwork to get this done. There's a lot of different things to look at. Okay. A lot of things in here. So we've been talking about the train set, up at the top here, train set, design, testing, manufacturing, maintenance, right? But we've got, safety enhancements. How do you go to do this stuff? Customer experience. We're doing ride quality improvements, product strategy, customer experience, commercialization. What's the mechanical service plan? How many new Acelas do I run versus regional trains do I run? How do I do that? Marketing communications, Moynihan, Washington Union Station. We're putting a new station in New Carrollton. We're trying to add new capacity to the railroad to do frequencies. Service and inspection facilities. Those are my mechanical facilities where I maintain the trains here. How do I do all that? IT, okay. Safety, the point of sale system, onboard information systems, the Wi-Fi. How do you set that up so you buy the ticket with the seat reservation systems, okay? Operations planning. You can see all of the stuff that goes into this. We've got all these teams working on all the stuff, and it all has to kind of come together at that perfect point for the day that we decide to launch revenue service, okay? And, I'm not going to, if you want me back, if I didn't talk too much, I'll come back for some other time. We can talk about this some more in the future here. But I just want to kind of get folks get a flavor. We got all these multiple work streams going. We've got a big project management organization stood up, with a lot of certified PMP people running things. So we can kind of keep track of it. We can always track, what's the critical path today? What am I working on? What's the critical path? How do we get through stuff, And then what you do is then take all the plans you made and throw COVID right in the middle of it. And then then you got to kind of start all over and replanning because COVID definitely has had an effect on some of this stuff, though. It's delayed some testing. It's delayed some manufacturing stuff. We're working through that to figure out what do we need to do about that. One of the struggles we've had with COVID too is, Alstom is from France. A lot of their engineers have worked on stuff over in France. And for a while, it was just so difficult to get French engineers and other engineers from Europe, and there's some folks from Germany, to get them over here, to get them on the train to do some of the stuff, or even get instrumentation pieces to come over here, with all, shipping delays. Just everything was in such a mess. We're working through all that now because we're still kind of totaling up, what the delays are going to be. We've been doing a lot of stuff, but it definitely slowed us down on some of the stuff that we had to go deal with it. So I think we are at the end of the presentation. So there's the train, and Dave, I am ready for questions if everybody is still awake.
I'm sure everybody's awake, and we topped out at 136.
Wow.
Including about 30 people on the watching on Facebook. So I think that's just about a new record for a Mass Bay meeting.
All right.
So what I'm going to start with is we're getting a lot of things here. So that opening slide. If I can scroll back up here.
You can find it.
Let's see.
All right, where is it? I got a lot.
No, you don't have to go back through the. Maybe it was maybe put it in the Q&A.
All right, it's almost here.
Oh, so the first guess was the Reading, maybe in Reading or Abrams Yard.
Abrams Yard, April 1971. Okay. Abrams Yard is the correct answer.
Jeff Gabriel guessed that at 8:09.
All right.
That's where that is. We won't try to find all the other answers to that.
Abrams Yard is good. That's it.
Oh, I gotta get down here. Okay, so let's see. Some people are saying north of Wilmington. I had a whole bunch of guesses of Newark, and see, so Wilmington, Delaware, Northeast Corridor, north of Newark, Trenton Cutoff.
Somebody's warmer. Somebody's warmer.
Royalton. Some of these, let's see. Then I asked Newark, New Jersey, or Newark, Delaware, and the answer folks said New Jersey, and then the last in was where the Trenton Cutoff takes off from the main line west of Paoli.
That's the best answer I've heard. So
Tom Angle, of course, got that.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I'll describe exactly where it is.
Pick up your prize at my house, Tom.
Okay. So if you notice, though, there's actually 6 tracks here. So there are 4 tracks. The photographer that took this picture, this is a famous PR picture they've used for years, okay? So this is on the Harrisburg line, okay? This is between a place called Fraser and a place called Exton, Pennsylvania, okay? So it's going to be out around milepost 26. As a matter of fact, it might be a little baby milepost there. That might be mile 25 or 26. I'm not sure exactly. So the 4 tracks of the Harrisburg line, we're standing between tracks 2 and 3. The old track 3 is now gone. 1, 2, and 4 are still there. It's used by the Keystone Service today. It's also used by SEPTA. The 2 tracks to the left are what I would call the P&T branch. It was called the Philadelphia and Thorndale branch. So that's actually an extension of the Trenton Freight Cutoff. So the Trenton Freight Cutoff went from Morrisville, Pennsylvania, where it left the Northeast Corridor just by Trenton, and came to Fraser, which is just about a mile or 2 in front of the photographer there, the way you're looking east, okay? But then the freight trains could come off the cutoff and either get on the Harrisburg line, but then later on they built the P&T branch and went up and over. And many folks may know there's a famous, you see pictures there all the time of the famous bridge at Whitford, Pennsylvania. It was a big truss bridge where it jumped over the tracks. And the P&T, the Whitford Bridge is behind the photographer there. So that is best guess I heard. It's right there around Exton with the P&T branch and the main line. There we go. Good job.
Okay, great. So we have a number of questions in the question and answer box. I'm just going to sort of work through those as we, in sort of the order they were received.
Yep.
And change my window here. So let's see. So if you have a question, Rather than try to put people in to ask your own questions, type it in the Q&A box. And Chris, there's a bunch of them, so I'd suggest try to keep your answers short as possible.
Okay, I'll do my best.
Get through all of these.
Yep.
So, and some of these are right on topic, and some of them aren't.
Okay.
It's first one here. When the pandemic subsides, what rail passenger plans will Amtrak consider between Portland, Seattle, and Vancouver, British Columbia? And with the Talgos returned, what type of equipment can we expect to ride on? Returned meaning no longer on the route.
Right. Okay. So a couple things. So we are sort of at the mercy of what's going on with COVID with the border situation right now. We can't go into Canada. So we frankly want to get back to as much service as we can. With everything going on with the Talgo Series 6 train sets, they will not be back in service. They are not coming back. We do have conventional equipment. The Talgos, by the way, speaking about cant deficiency, the Talgos were cleared for 5 inches of cant deficiency, which folks may not know it is exactly the same thing as the Ampli and the Horizons are actually cleared at also. So what you're going to see is you're going to see a combination of the Talgo Series 8 equipment that's out there that's owned by ODOT, plus some of the single level equipment for right now. And then there's discussion, there's talk going on. I don't know where it is, frankly. I'm not directly involved in that. But then obviously the Wisconsin sets, the Series 8 sets, the question is, do they go back into service or not? And I don't know that question has been answered, but I know there's been discussion about it, but I don't know that a final plan has been made for that yet.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next one. Todd Glickman asks, the current fleet's first class car has four-seater tables. In normal times, it means 16 passengers are rubbing knees with strangers. Rarely are there parties of 3 or 4 who really want to sit together. The new set's first-class car layout provide more privacy with fewer tables of 4, but hopefully more stable tray tables for the single seats than on the current generation.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to answer that. I personally haven't tried out those tray tables because the seats that I showed you in that picture, there's no tray tables installed yet. So I personally have not been able to check out the tray table. One of the things we are doing, though, with we actually do it right now with the entire legacy Acela Express. We actually went to full assigned seating, okay? And the new trains will be the same way. So you'll be able to figure out, and reserve if you don't want a table, because I personally, I love a table when I'm a table of 1 and there's 3 empty seats, but I hate the table. It's the worst thing when I have 3 full seats next to me. You'll be able to choose what your seat is in the future. It will be all assigned seating, in the trains as they get introduced. Great.
Derek Carter asks, I guess this goes back to in your discussion of what to do with the legacy Acelas. Has any thought been given to running 2 train sets coupled together for more capacity? Is that something
They have never been tested that way. There have been problems since the day they were delivered. They don't work well coupled together. It's not like the ICE train or the TGV trains where you see them coupled together. They just do not work well coupled together. Plus, once again, we still have the issue of that supporting that 1998 technology, that 1998 part supply, and so that's the reason why they're difficult. They're very expensive to maintain. They do a great job, but they're very expensive to maintain. And that's why we actually bought extra sets of the new kind. So instead of having 20, we actually have 28 of the new sets. It allows for service expansions. It allows for 30-minute frequencies, every 30 minutes on the south end of the railroad during peak times. That it's going to allow for hourly service up to Boston. We feel we'll be in a better position to do that than kind of try to keep those legacies going. They are very expensive to maintain the way they're set up. Very complicated trains, especially that tilt system is a lot of money.
Okay, let's see. Stefan Wench asks, how much additional cost is incurred on the power cars to accommodate 3 different voltages and frequency specs on the Northeast Corridor? Will there ever be a time when converting the Northeast Corridor to a single power spec could make sense based on rolling stock costs alone?
No, I don't think so. Because I think, though, it's not difficult to set it up. There's all sorts of transformers all over the place that run on multiple voltages. We've been doing it for years. Europeans run on 4. They run on AC and DC. Look at the TGV. It runs on DC in some places and AC, and that's very difficult to do. So it's not a lot of expense, though, in that transformer versus going out and converting. I would have to convert every single signal circuit in the impedance bonds. An impedance bond is that device that kind of helps the traction power pass around the insulated joint for the signal system. And I mean, just the thought of it, I don't know how many thousands of those impedance bonds are out there in order to kind of convert that whole signal system over for that. It's easier just to run with multiple. It's a lot easier to control some of the transformers on the trains. It's not a complicated thing, actually, especially with so many things on the transformers are now solid state. A lot of stuff can be done in solid state. There is still some switching when you go from 12.5 kV to 25 kV, but it works fairly well. And even the E60s used to do it, believe it or not. Those E60s used to be able to change voltage on the fly too. It's been a proven technology. It works okay.
Super. Okay. George Bulow asks, I thought that the articulated bogie is used on the Taugos was considered a shortcoming as compared to full trucks per car. What thinking and or technological change has taken place to lead Amtrak to now adapt this traction method?
I don't know that a Talgo ever had a shortcoming. It really wasn't a shortcoming. It was just different. It was just different. So yeah, I don't think we ever really saw it as a shortcoming. It was just different. It was just different, and it's fine. Things are fine, different as long as you have the right facility to maintain it. It's okay. It was a very lightweight train, and yeah, we don't have any problem with articulation. The only thing that people talk about is if you say, why do I do a train set versus loose cars? Okay. And they say, geez, well, if the car goes bad, you can't cut it out or something, all this stuff. Train sets are fine. Amtrak has had train sets for years. I mean, go back to the original turbo train, the UA turbo train, then the RTGs, then the RTLs. And, we've run it for years. As long as your maintenance facility is designed to handle a train set, you can run a train set. Okay. That's the key, to get the maintenance facility and the equipment to kind of match up. You can do it, because then you're not relying on cutting a train apart like a single Ampli car. You can repair everything in line, and frankly, you get better productivity out of it because you're forced to do other maintenance practices, and the equipment stays in service much longer, much quicker with less maintenance, frankly. That's how the Talgos also, remember I said the Talgos were probably the nearest percent to 100 reliability. I said that earlier in the day, and that still holds true.
Okay. We note that the seating configuration in the new equipment will basically have 50% facing in each direction. Do riders actually like riding backwards? As Alan Schneider asked this question, so I much prefer riding facing the direction of the train.
Well, I don't know how many riders will like facing backwards, okay? But we've actually done some surveys and some folks, okay? And there's probably, please don't quote me on this number, but I want to say the number may have been under like 15 to 20% of riders who dislike riding backwards, okay? Who dislike it. So the other, like me, I'm okay either way. I don't care either way. I mean, maybe I have a slight preference to forward, but it really doesn't matter to me, okay?
Yes.
What they do like, though, what you get two things by forward backwards, okay? Well, you get one thing, big thing. We have the ability to put electrical outlets in the seats, okay? Because the Acelas, what don't you like on the Acela? If you're sitting in the Acela and you get the aisle seat, you want to plug your phone in, you got to go reach across that person, go down around their knees, you're over here, where'd you go? You're reaching, people don't like that. So they disliked much, much more about having to reach across a person to plug their phone or their computer into the wall than they did about riding backwards, okay? And so by fixing the seats, we'll be able to make electrical connections. You'll have a seat right there next to you. You don't have to reach across your fellow passenger. And as we introduce assigned seating on it, you'll be able to say, I want a forward seat or a backward seat, and you'll be able to say, oh, I definitely don't want that, you know what I mean? And you'll be able to go choose your seat on the train with assigned seating. So we think we pretty much got it licked. I mean, is there going to be everybody 100% happy all the time? Probably not, but we have it. I believe we've got it well in control with the research we've done and the thought we put into it, though.
Okay. Somebody here just said, I was working late and just logged on. Will the show be available on YouTube or other social media? And the answer is yes. It will be retained on Facebook, so you can go back to our Facebook page after the program is over and watch it there. I think it takes a little bit of time for it to archive itself. It'll also be up on our YouTube channel. The link for that is on the members or the meetings page of the Mass Bay website, massbayre.org. So there's a link to that, or you probably just get it by searching Mass Bay RRE in the YouTube search box. In fact, all of our Zoom programs, Third Thursday programs, are archived there. That probably won't be up for 24 hours or more. It takes quite a bit of time to process the video, and then has to be uploaded. And I don't think I'm going to be able to get to it tomorrow. So, but by sometime on Saturday, I expect that'll be up there and available. So we got rid of that one. Let's see. Question. Since railroads are regarded as mass transportation, why was the original Acela acquired with so little capacity, 304 seats, and the new one so little more, 386, rather than the much larger, more efficient size, as was routine in past years and is normal in Europe and elsewhere?
Well, I'll be honest, I don't have a good answer to that. I was not around when we picked what we were going to do, okay? And frankly, I'm not sure if folks knew what we were going to do. I mean, it was sort of modeled off the Metroliner. But like I said, though, I mean, it was designed to be expandable. So although we bought it at 6, it sort of mirrored that Metroliner. The goal was, as I said, to be able to expand it in the future to 10. But the problem was, by the time I guess we got around to it, we couldn't go and buy that other technology. We couldn't go match those cars. And I guess, maybe that wasn't thought about by then, but it was always kind of envisioned that we could expand it at some point in time. At this point in time, the commercial life, there's commercial life and there's other life. I sort of passed the commercial life and with the technology. So that's why we chose to go new here instead.
Yeah. I suppose another factor must be platform length.
Well, the platforms themselves are okay. It was difficulty. We are so hemmed in, like in Sunnyside Yard in New York or Boston. I mean, there's not a lot of extra real estate in Boston, as folks all know, right? Everybody knows that. And, we were also hemmed in for our maintenance facilities, although I don't want to say we thought little. I mean, we could have found ways to extend some of the maintenance facilities, but, we only have a limited amount of resources, so we just do what we can at the time, frankly, with what we got, frankly. So it was designed to be expanded, though. Just by the time we got around to it, we couldn't buy the right kind of cars to go with it to match them up.
Okay. Sort of a question, comment, whatever. It's well known that the original Acelas ended up being 4 inches wider, I think, than was originally planned.
Oh, I'm going to dispel that myth right now. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Let's
so
finish the question.
So I'm not exactly sure what the question is, but apparently that costs 30 minutes in travel time. So care to comment briefly without the.
Okay, so let me take a
or not. You can take a pass on it if you want.
No, there's no truth to the rumor. There's no truth. There's a rumor out there that I'm not going to mention names here, but our vice president marketed it, and therefore, the cars got too fat and they would hit other trains, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, not true at all. What did happen though was, I think, I'm going to guess, this is the best way to put it. It's hard to say exactly, but I believe there were some bad assumptions made from certain people. And basically, what the Acela train is, if you take a look at the cars as manufactured by Bombardier, it sort of mirrors what the LRC, for the folks remember those LRC trains were at that time in Canada, and some assumptions were made in that, although they sort of do fit down the Northeast Corridor, they're limited. And by the time the train was already kind of going around, we looked at it and said, well, this isn't right. You can't assume this. This is not how this is going to work. It was sort of too late. Okay. So some folks made some assumptions, about what would fit on the corridor. And I believe there were some bad assumptions, frankly. I don't know if I answered the question. I'm only going to say so much here.
That's okay. That's okay. Yeah. Let's see. Carl McKinney asked, can I don't know whether he's referring to the legacy Acela or the new one. Could the train's computer systems be updated remotely like Apple updates its phones?
Well, so you can update software on a phone, but at a certain point in time, the chips and everything else that are in those things are only going to accept the programming. So you could try and put new software on it, but software also, what we don't think about is you can upgrade software, but to a certain point in time, though, it just won't work on those chips and those cards anymore. You're going to have to upgrade the hardware that's all in there, okay? And then with that, then you do programming, and then the programs work on older operating systems, or they, software systems are designed to work on certain hardware levels, though. And frankly, you need a whole redesign of everything to kind of keep up with it. So
Okay.
you can't just update it. It doesn't necessarily work that way.
Okay, great. We've got 6 questions left,
Okay.
and I think I'm just gonna ask people to, I think we need to cut this off and wrap things up pretty soon here. Daryl Arndt asks, what other high-speed trains have you experienced in other countries?
Me personally, I've been on the
Yes.
TGV. I have been in Germany on the ICE train. I have actually I personally have operated the X2000 train between Stockholm and Göteborg over in Sweden a number of years ago. So I've been on that one. I don't know if the Norwegians, you count that stuff as high-speed trains. They got some nice, train sets over there. I've been on the Channel trains. I've been on a variety of things over there. I have not been to Spain yet. I've not been to Japan yet. So someday.
Great. Are there any plans to electrify the route between Boston to Portland?
Nobody's talked about it. I don't hear anybody. Now, well, I shouldn't say that, right? The MBTA, as we all know, made that big announcement in 40 years or whatever it is that they want to electrify a bunch of their commuter lines. Okay. So that would be a start, but once you get to the state line up there, Plaisdale, it's still, I think, another 107 miles, I think, before you get to Brunswick. So nobody's talking about it. We just like to get all 10 frequencies back, and I'd like to get some of the Pan Am slow waters off to make the trains run on time. But they're working on it. They're actually working on it. We were talking to them the other day. And one of the things we want to do is right now, if folks don't know, put my PTC hat on for a minute. PTC, we run on a regular schedule 10 trains a day up there, and basically that's bumping up against the federal limit, which is would change when CSX, or I'm assuming CSX takes that whole thing over. So we don't have any more room to expand. And the first thing we want to do with the Downeaster service is to spend some money. We've got some grant money to put PTC in on that route, so we had the ability to expand more trains. Okay. And then there's some opportunities too, we could look at in the future. Are there other infrastructure improvements we could remove? Because it's not necessarily about the electrification. Really, what do the passengers want? They don't care if they ride electric or diesel train. They want to know about trip time. Okay. So we can spend this much money on wires, but if I can spend this much money and cut another 10 or 20 minutes off and be more competitive with the buses, you actually get much more value for the dollar you spent in the infrastructure, and that would be something, that we, would actually be able to have a conversation about.
Okay, great. Just run through the last few questions here. Yep. Other recent Amtrak motive power purchases have the traditional engineer and fireman set up in the cab, even though the trains operate with just an engineer. The new Acela seems to be set up for one operator centered in the cab. What was the rationale for that?
Well, two things. We actually do have 2 engineers in the cab in a bunch of places. Okay. So let's talk about the Acela first. The new Acela does have, you see the windshield right on the picture behind Dave here in his background. In fact, I'm actually standing right there behind that windshield on that train where that picture is. But it is in the center because we only do operate one locomotive engineer here. And it's actually, some of the engineers are not sure if they like it or not. I personally like it. You get a much better field of view. You can see signals better. You kind of see left to right a little bit better on the Acela. And plus, it's off-the-shelf technology. It's a standard European design. They did not have to redesign the whole cab to bring it over here. It saves money. Okay, that's the first thing on the Acela. Second thing is on the new Charger locomotives that we're buying right now. We still do operate 2 engineers in a lot of places around this country here. So just due to fatigue reasons, our contract has anywhere the run is over 6 hours or greater. We actually operate with 2 locomotive engineers in the cab. So, for example, the auto train. The whole auto train runs with 2 engineers in it. There's 2 engineers on the Chief. The Zephyr's got 2 engineers on pieces of it. The Crescent's got 2 engineers on pieces of it. The Meteor's got 2 engineers. So there's a bunch of trains around. We actually do have 2 folks in the cab, and that's why it's set up in the traditional setup still.
Okay. Kenneth wants to know, have there been any issues with passengers refusing to sit in their assigned seats on Acela, such as refusing to move when the rightful seat holder arrives?
Nope, I have not seen any of that. Got lots of people who get in trouble for not putting their mask on, but I have not seen anything on assigned seating.
Okay. This takes us to a different part of the country. Are there any replacements in the works for the superliner cars used on the long distance trains?
Not yet. We're talking about it though. One of the things we're doing with the superliners right now is for the folks who maybe have taken the regional trains over the last few years, you know, you can see we've done a refresh on that, new cushions and carpets and things like that. Then we're moving on to the single level long distance fleet. The Florida trains are all getting the M Fleet 2s, the Viewliners, all getting a makeover inside. The goal is to do the superliners next. So that's what's going to be next for the superliners is how do we refresh those interiors? That brown carpet is dated. I don't know if we're going to pull all that brown carpet off the wall, but they're trying to do a refresh on that, at least to kind of get, I mean, there's some cheap things you could do to say, wow, this is nice. I mean, if you got on a regional Amfleet car, you have no idea that that thing was built in 1974 and 1975. I mean, it's a great car, but you don't know that, right? You don't think about that, right? You know, one of the next things we are working on, though, the superliners are doing okay. The Amfleet cars, though, are actually at the nearing the end of their useful life. Okay, the Amfleet cars, as good as a Bud product is, and they are great cars. Okay, except for the doors in the wintertime, the rest of them are great. Bud really got those cars right. You know, think about it. Like if you had a 1974 Chevy Impala and you were driving it up and down I-95 at 125 miles an hour for 9 hours a day, how would that Impala be right now, right? It would be worn out. And that's what's going on with the Amfleet cars right now. So we are actually getting, you know, we are seeing structural issues, you know, as we see. There's nothing that's unsafe. You know, we studied it. We looked at everything with it, you know, and like if we see something, we fix it to make sure everything is good. But as time goes on, those cars wear more and more. The maintenance costs on those cars are going to keep going up. It really becomes largely uneconomical. So we are very actively working right now on replacements for the Amfleet. We're actually, I can't talk too much about it because we are working on it, and hopefully, you know, that's going to be the next big thing. We have a real issue with those Amfleets right now because they just get beat up with all those miles we put on them. They've been a great workhorse for Amtrak they're going to be 50 years by the time they're done here. I mean, frankly, they're going to be 50 years old here in 3 more years. Think about it. Amfleets are 50 years old, all right? So, you know, that's the first thing. We're talking about it. We just haven't gotten around to the superliners yet. They're kind of third out on the list there.
Okay, great. Almost to the end of the list here.
Yeah.
Alan Schneider wants to know how many horsepower per power car.
Maybe I can cheat here for a second. Hang on a minute. Hang on. I'm going to look on my computer here if I can find it. Give me a second. You know what? I'm not going to have it here. I don't know offhand. It's kind of comparable to the Acela though. I think it's a little bit less than the Acela because once again, the Acela legacy fleet was built for the 10-car train, so it's a little bit less, but it can still achieve the top speed. You know.
Okay. And last question from the audience. What's the expected service life of these new trains?
Well, as long as we can get out of them. I mean, the other fleet lasted for about 20 years, you know. You know, it's going to be at least that, you know. Like I said, I mean, look at the Amfleet. We can run them for 50, but at some point in time, the technology does become old, and 20 is probably about the right time if you can invest in a fleet and to renew it. I mean, it's more than you're going to get out of your average automobile. You know, but I mean, I'm sure they would keep on going, but, you know, we want to see it for at least 20, I'm sure.
Yeah. Somebody made a comment wondering if the original Acelas running basically Windows 98 ever experienced the blue screen of death.
No, actually, the stuff is pretty good. The software that's on the legacy fleet is actually there, but it's not as complicated as some stuff, and you're not getting constant patches from stuff. So when I should say though, the software on the train is actually its own software. Like when you boot it up, it actually get big Bombardier. In fact, I did one. Where was I the other day? That booted up. It said Bombardier Transportation. Oh, look at that. I reactivated a screen in Boston a few weeks ago. The Windows 98 computer is the computer, the laptop that I have to take to go plug into the train, into the maintenance board to go make settings and adjustments, though, to be able to talk its language. So it's actually not, the train is actually running its own special operating system. It's actually the Windows laptop to be able to sync up with the program to be able to manipulate and
Gotcha.
make adjustments to the software.
Okay, and I had a couple of final questions.
Yeah.
One of the things that's quite noticeable about the new train sets is that the car bodies have a little bump out in the side, and the locomotives, the power cars, are flat-sided, and that's quite unlike the legacy Acela. And also, I noted that the model that you had on display when you made the announcement of the awarding of the contract also had a power car that had a slightly curved side profile that matched the coaches. So, what happened?
I have no idea. I look at that myself every time, like, really? Is that what that is? But I don't know. I'll have to find out. So I'll tell you what, Dave. So I'll root around and see if I can find any reason. If I'm back here another year from now, or I can even shoot you a note.
You're
You
always
can say,
welcome,
hey,
Chris.
yeah, I know. Well, I appreciate that. And I appreciate everything you guys do. But just so if I do find out, okay, if I can ever find out over the next 12 months or whenever it is with my town project, Dave, I've got your email. I will shoot you a note, and then you can announce it at one of the meetings here. Say, Chris got back to me, and all right, and I don't know who
It'll
said
be a
it.
feature in Culver.
Okay, all right.
And the last question I had was, when all the testing is complete and the trains are ready to go in service, I mean, obviously you're not gonna, I don't think you're gonna get 20 sets delivered, so I may have answered my own question, or 20. How many sets are you buying, first of all?
28.
28.
28.
So will you be
Let's do
sort
it.
of rolling those out?
I'm gonna leave this thing. That was enough. Sorry about
That's
that.
okay. So
All right, Dick, have a good night.
Okay, night, Dick.
Yeah. Night.
Night, Dick. Good to see you.
Yeah, good. Hey, I'll talk to you, Doug.
Okay, okay, good.
Okay.
Let's keep that private, okay, guys? So anyway, is the plan to keep the legacy Acelas in service and take them out in bit by bit as the new trains come online? Or
Yes, yeah. So you'll see, right now, and the other big question mark we have right now is COVID. We just don't know, with the COVID stuff, completely threw a monkey wrench in everything. So always the plan was, as new train sets come online, the old train sets go out. So at some point you're happen to have it, just like we did with the Acelas and the Metroliners, and at some point in time, then they finally go away. But what we don't know is, when does the COVID ridership come back? How many will we need? COVID's just really thrown a monkey wrench into the whole planning process here. So we're kind of hedging our bets. We're just not sure yet how it's going to pan out, depending on where the ridership comes.
I would think that at some point there would be sort of a marketing issue as the new sets come online and have, all these, better amenities, smoother ride, etc. And people are not going to want to ride the old ones once they've tasted the new ones.
Yeah. So we're that's one of those teams is actually kind of working on that. So it was a little bit easier when it was Metroliners, because you had Metroliners, and so what we did is a Metroliner would run on the 10 o'clock job, but the 9 o'clock was an Acela Express, and it was called Acela Express or Metroliner. Now this is all going to be Acela Express, because these are just another version of the Acela Express coming out. It's the next generation of equipment here. So it'll be different in the booking. It'll be different car numbers. And we're talking about how do you know what you're getting on? And that's all kind of being bandied about and kicked around. But they will be on certain departures, though, because if one train's got 304 and others got 386, I need to be able to make sure this train's set, the inventory is set right, or it's this inventory. So,
yeah. Okay, great. Well, Chris, I just want to thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. It was extremely thorough, and I think we all learned a lot, in addition to setting a Mass Bay attendance record. So with that, we're going to end the official meeting and the live stream. Those of you who are attending the webinar are welcome to stick around and chat for a few minutes. We'll elevate you into the main meeting, and you'll get your own little Hollywood Square here. I don't want to let this go too long because it is getting late. And I haven't had dinner yet, although in all fairness, I'm in Arizona, so I'm 3 hours behind you guys. But anyway, thank you so much, Chris, for a great program. And we certainly will be happy to have you back again. And I'll be in touch with you in a day or two. So anyway, for those of you watching on Facebook, this is it. And
thanks, Chris. That was terrific.
All right, good. Well, thank you for having me again. Nice locomotives.